They have broken the law. Now they are paying the price. Removed from Canadian society into a world the rest of us can only imagine. Tonight, we'll show you that world. From the special handling unit, where the most dangerous are held, to a minimum security facility that some say is too soft. A man who's never been in prison before. Others who will spend the rest of their lives in custody. The corrections officers who work the cell blocks, and the woman who manages the entire system. You will see it all as you've never seen it before.
This is a CBC News Big Picture Special. Inside Canada's prisons. From Collins Bay Penitentiary in Kingston, Ontario, here is Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. This is Cell Block 2 at the Collins Bay Institution, one of the oldest penitentiaries in Canada. Construction started here in 1929. This is what they call a high-medium security penitentiary. It has about 200 inmates. We are using this as our base tonight for an unprecedented television program, a 3-hour examination of Canada's correctional system. Over the last few weeks, CBC News has been given remarkable access to a world few Canadians ever see and even fewer understand. We're going to show you 8 reports from inside federal institutions across this country. Together, they will weave a portrait of how Canada deals with people who break the law. There will be scenes some of you might rather not see, but it is best to remember we are trying to show you what it is really like. In another part of this institution, we have a group of men and women intimately familiar with the penal system, some with a professional interest, and also some who live here as inmates. We'll be talking to them throughout the night. We begin with some facts about our prisons. They cost us, did you know this, about $2 billion a year. But what do we get for that? Here's Brian Stewart.
On any day, there are more than 37,000 prisoners in Canada. The most serious offenders, 12,700 doing 2 years and more, land inside the federal penitentiaries of Corrections Canada, like this one, Joyceville, Kingston. It's not soft. Contrary to widespread belief, most of these inmates are not in the minimum security jails, the club feds politicians love to ridicule. Nearly 80% of inmates are behind the high security of medium pens, permitted only restricted movement, or in even more controlled maximum security. The reality for most, tiny cells, long days of monotony or tension, often for years on end. For many long-timers, especially lifers, the years crawl by in a regimented haze.
We no longer even think about the outside because our life is here. This is our life. We're told when to sleep, we're told when to eat, we're told when to move, we're told what to wear, when to wear it. You know, like there's a lot of little rules that the public don't realize that are enforced daily.
We also imprison more than we think. Our jail population is small only in comparison to America. Check elsewhere. We jail more people, around 129 per 100,000, than other Western nations. More than Britain, substantially more than France, Italy, and Germany, and more than double the Scandinavian rate of, say, Denmark and Norway. And because Canadian penitentiaries are kept much smaller than most, usually fewer than 500 inmates, both surveillance and treatment of prisoners is more intense. Corrections Canada has grave problems, such as illegal drugs inside, and the spread of criminal gangs that seek to corrupt or intimidate staff. But it also claims more success than realized. Commissioner of Corrections Lucy McClung insists no one runs prisons better than Canada.
Better than number one. I receive on a weekly basis delegations from across the world. There are some that I have to turn back because I simply cannot accommodate everybody.
Our prison system is inherently controversial, however. Somehow supposed to confine, punish, and yet repair all at the same time. A very hard balance to get right.
Well, we're now in the chapel of Collins Bay Penitentiary. We've assembled a group of inmates here and some correctional staff. We also have a group in the middle of it all. These are people we will turn to for expert observations. Time is precious to us tonight. We're not going to take any of it to introduce them right now. You'll get to know them as the night goes on. We also want to tell you our website has extensive extra material, including a tour of Collins Bay, and you can access that anytime at cbc.ca. We also welcome your comments at the address you see on your screen right now. We're live on CBC News World across the country and on the main network in Atlantic Canada. If that's where you're watching us now, we'd love to hear from you for this program. But we'll have more comment on tomorrow's National, so no matter where you're watching, please let us know what you think. Now, Brian Stewart is the National's senior correspondent. He's here on our panel tonight. You just saw a slice of his documentary overview. And Brian, not only in your report, but as we're going to witness over the next 3 hours, we've had remarkable access over these last few weeks inside the prison system. Why do you think we got it?
Well, certainly because we asked a lot and kept going back and asking, but also I think the system, the Corrections Canada, realizes now that the prison system is part of society and has to be seen, warts and all. If they want to brag about what they do right, they also have to open those doors and show perhaps what they're not doing well, some of the problems they're facing. They're very anxious, I think, to give some applause to their own staff at times. They're very anxious to engage the prison system more with the community. That seems to be at least the objective. I think, as I said, all prison systems are flawed. They certainly know they are flawed. They have great flaws too. But you can't keep the doors closed, really, without your public having grave misunderstandings of the system altogether. And I think they're worried that the Canadian public really doesn't understand the correction system. And until something can be cleared up more, it never will.
Okay, well, we're hoping to clear some of those misconceptions up tonight. We're going to start by meeting a man who just became part of the federal penitentiary system. He was arrested, he was tried, he was found guilty, and then he was sentenced to serve time. More of it than he ever imagined. Allison Smith followed him through the intake process. It's a process that it seems impossible to be prepared for. Entry to a world fraught with fear of the unknown.
This is a journey of fear. Millhaven is notoriously tough and mean. Many have traveled this road. For every one, there is a gnawing dread of what's to come. Every criminal in Ontario sentenced to do time in a federal prison comes to Millhaven first.
Echo 529.
Right thumb. Go back into cage number 3, please.
Neil Suter. The crime, possession of stolen property. Sentence, 2 years and 6 months.
My first real feel of jail was that holding pen. I mean, they herded me down the aisleway and I went into this pen and I just felt like I was out of place. This was not, where I was supposed to be. And, I was afraid. Most there was fear, and just fear of the unknown.
To even visit Millhaven is to pass into another world.
G-Control, open up the door, please.
Maximum security, a gateway to the federal prison system. This is one of the biggest assessment centers in the country. Neil Suter is 34 years old. Educated, an auto body mechanic. Never been to jail before. Now, from a provincial holding jail, he's here, just trying to figure out how to do the time and stay safe.
Have you got to know many of the guys around here?
I'm not like a social butterfly or anything like that. I pick and choose who I want to associate with.
How do you pick and choose?
You just spend a lot of time listening. You just got to watch what you're doing, really.
There are prison rules and inmate rules. The first, you do your own time. Keep your nose out of other people's business. Don't ask questions about another con's crime or time. especially in assessment. It can take up to 3 months. Everyone's watching you. One scrap, one wrong move, and Neil could blow it.
Here is where they determine where you go. If you have incidents on your record of violence or something like that, you know, stemming from fights or whatever the case, you know, arguments with the guards or whatever, I mean, all that goes on your record.
Should your behavior deteriorate, this can be revisited.
Neil is a low-risk offender. Still, his prison parole officer, Bonnie Clark, is trying to figure him out, wants to be sure. She'll recommend where he'll serve his time, the counseling he'll get. His prison fate is in her hands.
You know, I thought it was a property offense, and it being a property offense, it wasn't as serious as any other type of offense. You know.
Neil ran an auto body shop just outside London, Ontario, most of it legitimate business. But he also bought stolen vehicles, fixed them up, repainted them, changed them enough to resell them. In January, he pled guilty to 13 counts of possession of stolen property. Even so, he never thought he'd end up in jail.
January 22nd, plus 10 days. Dearest Carol, it's a struggle to force myself to do the daily things of one's existence as I combat frustration and depression. The longer I persevere in this hell, it seems the harder it gets.
Neil pours out his loneliness and fear in letters to his fiancée.
I let my hunger pains remind me that I'm still alive. This is not a dream, but I am alone, alone, alone. Except for you, my salvation from this void. I love you and always will. Sorry, Neil.
His family has never been more important to him. He worries about his 10-year-old daughter and 14-year-old stepdaughter.
I didn't want them to see this part of my life. You know, I didn't want them to look down on me. But I did want them to know what the consequences of doing something wrong is.
Neil's doing everything he can to make the best of this. He got himself a jailhouse job.
Can I get the movement list, please?
It gets him out of his cell, looks good on his record, helps with that minimum security classification.
We're cons, just like you are. Our job is to be liaison. We're to, you know, between the inmates and the coppers.
Just a few weeks in, he's a unit clerk doing prison orientation.
Every night at 7:30 they do a stand-up count. The reason they do that now is they had a couple guys OD. They didn't know until the next morning. They were lying on their bed. They thought they were just sleeping, right? So every night now, 7:30, you got to stand up for a count.
It's oppressive routine, even for meals.
Tells me it's soup.
Yep.
The food here is very repetitive. It's the same schedule. Day in, well, week in, week out, it's the same thing. Salt, pepper, and what I thought originally was mayonnaise. I grabbed a package of this, and turns out that it's condoms.
There aren't many left in there.
No.
Some people said to us, you know, things like, you don't whistle, you don't sing, you know, there's some words you don't use, you don't talk to the guards. Are there things like that that you figured out that...
The whistling one's kind of interesting. When I was in the detention center, my cellmate, he'd been through the system many times. One day I was sitting in the cell and I whistled, right? Oh, just about jumped down my throat, right? His explanation was whistling is for the birds. The birds are free. We're not. You don't whistle.
It doesn't take long to decipher the inmate's code, but for a first-timer, still learning the rules, uncertainty feeds fear.
What are you afraid of most?
I was afraid of my safety, you know, like, I don't know, my life, you know. I was afraid I might lose my life type thing. That sense is very real in here because you're dealing, especially in the assessment unit here, you're dealing with every walk of life criminal, right? These guys are from murderers to somebody like me.
These are some of the things that were here when I arrived. Basically, they were found in the cells or in the shops.
Yves Delorier is Millhaven's preventive security officer. For every weapon that ends up in his collection, he knows there are countless more.
What's this?
This is what we call, or the inmates refer to as a shiv. It's a brush handle. It's been melted so that a nail could be fastened to it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so the inmate can have that sitting in his cup on top of his shelf, and unless you pull it out and look at it, you'd never know it was a weapon. Does it get used often? Probably more than we know.
Do I have one? I have my security blanket, and I usually wear it 95% of the time. And it's not a measure of anything.
All right.
But it could be, right? You know, it's a pen. But it could be used, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neil just can't get caught with anything more than a pen. There's too much at risk. It would go on his prison record and would hurt his overall prison assessment.
Your personal emotional orientation, do you display anger, impulsive behavior?
They do psychological evaluations, they do educational grading, they do substance abuse testing, and they develop a correctional plan. They develop a plan to keep you out of this place.
The custody rating scale is used to assist the parole officer.
Just getting through each day is one day closer to getting out of here. Not out of jail yet, but out of this place, Millhaven. Bonnie Clark, his parole officer, has completed her investigation of his case.
Neil, to summarize, custody rating scale recommends minimum security. The security classification review recommends minimum security. And that's the recommendation that I will be taking to the Pen Placement Board within the next couple days.
Later, Steve.
Neil Suter's done what he set out to do, get out of Millhaven intact to serve his sentence in a minimum security prison.
See you later, Hollywood. Yep.
But this is what he'd only dreamed of.
Okay, Suter, being released on bail. Here's your fax here.
Bail. Just days after getting word he'd be transferred to minimum security, he's going home for a while.
Jane Crosby for End Control, we're on our way up with the offender.
He's appealing his sentence, and he'll be out until the appeal is heard in July.
It certainly feels like spring. It'd be easier coming back because I know what to expect now. The unknown factor is no longer unknown. Hello. It's a sweet but bitter victory because I know I'm going to be coming back.
Neil Suter, a free man while he appeals his sentence. He'll be online at cbc.ca after the program to talk about his experience. Right here, we'll be talking about his arrival at corrections and find out if the assessment system works. But first, this short break. Welcome back. Time to get right to the discussion on this key issue of those first few days when an inmate arrives in a federal prison. Kevin Brown is our inmates representative here on our panel. Kevin, we heard Neil Suter talking about how scared he was in those first hours, those first days. Were you scared?
I think everybody that goes down for the first time is scared. I think not knowing what's going to happen next, I think is paramount in everybody's mind.
Did they prepare you for this in any way?
No, not at all. When you walk through the door, it's you're herded into a cage, you're brought down to a cage, you're put in the cage, and you're left there for 22 hours a day. You're fed 3 times a day. You're not told any routine, any schedule other than your yard time. You learn as you go.
Did you have any idea what it was going to be like? You must have had some impressions of what it would be like.
Like most people, you know, when you're first time going down, you think of the movies. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to keep my back to the wall, that sort of thing. I think that it's, as you go, you learn right away. There's guys there that have been there before you. A lot of them will show guys exactly what's to do and what not to do, what to say, what not to say, those sort of things. You learn as you go, and you learn quickly.
Lou Kelly, corrections officer. You've been involved with this intake process, the assessment program as they come in. What's your view on this?
Well, it's probably the most important piece of work that we do, in the sense that what we the goal is to develop a correctional plan. We gather up all of the information that we possibly can gather on the individual, judges' reasons for sentencing, information from the province if they've served previous time, and to identify what their program needs are so that we can develop what we call a correctional plan that will enable us to identify and provide the programs that they need.
Is this before they arrive or
no,
after they arrive?
After they arrive.
So there is this sort of period, as Kevin talks
Absolutely.
about, as Neil talked about.
It's a very difficult time. It's a very difficult time because there's an element of the assessment process. There's a queuing up of people coming in, and so there is a substantial amount of downtime associated with that process.
All right, Randy White is an Alliance MP and a critic of the Solicitor General's Department. Is it tough enough these first few days?
Well, Peter, I think we have to look at Neil's situation. It was his first conviction, perhaps, but it certainly wasn't his first time he was involved in crime. And he says he's on a journey of fear, and he fears for his safety. I'm glad he is. I hope he's so scared that he doesn't want to come back to prison. He's, as you saw, he was released fairly early, and he was just doing a little over 2 years. And I hope he gets it indelible on his mind that this is not a nice place to come from. I'm scared when I come here, and I'm going to obey the law when I get out.
So are you saying you like it the way it is, or you'd like it even tougher?
I think it's good that he's scared. I think it's great, and I hope Neil wants to get back out and stay out and not come back into this.
All right. Well, one of the inmates in our audience wants to have a say on this. Go ahead.
No disrespect, sir, but to me that's a typical Alliance approach to this situation. There's a lot of inmates in this institution here. You're talking about assessment at Millhaven that shouldn't be here. Maybe they're here because they're young. I don't know exactly how the assessment works, other than there's a lot of people in here that should be in minimums, and perhaps because you go through one intake officer there will look at your case when it should be maybe 5 or 6 different intake officers look at one inmate's
What are you
case.
saying? They don't know enough about you when they make the decisions?
I'm saying there's not enough people looking at the individual's case. Usually it's depending on maybe 1 or 2 people. There should be a lot more people involved in this assessment over at Millhaven.
Lou Kelly?
Well, in fact, there are a number of people involved. It's a multidisciplinary team approach. There's a parole officer, but it also includes psychologists, the input from correctional workers. It's very much a gathering up of information from various sources.
Okay. Anyone over here? Yeah,
I know that our society is information-based, and what we see on paper, we believe. If we see this on paper, we believe this. But the problem with that is there's a lot of information that's not on paper, and that needs to be looked at also.
But what do you mean? What are you trying to tell us?
What I'm trying to say is that, like, with every human or every being, there's a lot of factors involved, and we're dynamic creatures. We're not just static. And to just label people a certain way, a certain being, is very labeling in itself.
All right, we're going to give the last word to Randy White here on these points. You're hearing from the prisoners themselves.
Well, the individuals talking are talking about the process involved, and I can't speak for the process within the walls, but my comments are directed at Neil's situation. Neil's lucky in a way. He's got a little over 2 years to serve in a penitentiary. I hope Neil gets out and stays out, and the way to do that, if he was scared and apprehensive, which I suspect is normal, as Kevin says here, I hope he is scared enough to say, I don't want to go back to that, I'm going to change.
Okay, we're going to leave that discussion on the floor there for now, because we're going to move on our big picture. Next, women behind bars.
These men have access to everything, walk around whatever, and we're just like stacked in a warehouse.
Some of you may remember the unforgettable images of the end of a disturbance at P4W, the old prison for women in Kingston. That prison was shut down shortly after Canadians first saw the pictures, which left the Corrections Service trying to figure out what to do with maximum security female inmates. The solution, housing them in male institutions, has stirred white-hot controversy. Here's what Anna Maria Tremonti found at the Saskatchewan Penitentiary in Prince Albert.
Male staff in range.
The rattle of the keys signals the start of another day for the maximum security women living inside the Saskatchewan Penitentiary for men. The space is cramped. Groups of 4 cells open onto what's just a larger cell.
I'll make a coffee.
There are violent maximum security women, but Corrections Canada has been criticized for including women with mental health problems in maximum. And it is perhaps telling that this women's prison used to be the men's psychiatric unit.
I'm not getting anything. I'm just sitting here existing. Just to exist.
Suzanne wants to adjust to real life. Sandy's adjusted to this life.
I adapted in prison like an animal adapts to the forest.
And Tammy keeps trying and failing to change.
I take responsibility. I accept responsibility for the things that I do wrong.
If prison is to punish and rehabilitate, the logic behind this particular prison is to buy time. There was no place for maximum security female prisoners in the West, and so they brought them here, temporarily. That was 6 years ago, and they are still here. 15 women now, most of them native, in one little corner of a prison for more than 500 men. Canada's corrections investigator has called their conditions unacceptable and discriminatory. Women isolated from society because of their crimes are even further isolated by the very system that is supposed to be preparing them to eventually re-enter their communities. Tell me a little bit about your room.
Well, I have my pictures over here. My families, my mother and my sister and my brother. I have my common law, all pictures all here. These are the cards that she sends me.
Suzanne Leclerc appears a jumble of contradictions with a desperate little girl voice and a tough outward appearance. She came here from medium security prison in Kitchener 2 months ago. This is her second stint in prison. The first lasted 7 years. This time she's in for assault. She's got heroin and cocaine problems. Her cell, even with the homey touches, reminds her here she's nothing.
No, it's not home.
What is it?
It's a hole in the wall. Every morning I get up and I wait for nighttime to go back to sleep. That's all there is. Yeah. And it's mentally really disturbing me. I can't function like this. You know, and then they wonder why I get so depressed.
Did you used to hurt yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
What did you do?
I used to slash. There was so much pain inside me, so much bitterness, and didn't know how to take it out. I didn't know what to do. So I started slashing my arms.
You want to show me? Those are all the scars, huh?
Yeah, those are the scars. And here is where I stabbed myself.
That wasn't very long ago.
No. That, about 2 months ago. Yeah.
You don't want to do that anymore, do you?
No.
This is my room that I'll be living in. I just got out of segregation and I have to organize it. Wash the walls.
There's an impatience about Sandy Pequation. She's been in prison 23 years, since she was 18. She was first locked up for armed robbery, then murder. She helped an inmate kill herself, and for that she got life. She ends up in segregation a lot because she lashes out. The walls close in on her.
Pardon me?
Do you think of it as your home?
Yeah, it's got to be your home when you're doing a long time like that. So yeah, it is my home. I get angry very easy, and probably because I get violent at times. Yeah, it makes me feel really closed in, like there's nowhere to go. You're stuck on this a 4-cell unit all day long, a little shower. This is how small it is, and we're stuck here like 24 hours in a whole day.
Tammy Pepin was an accessory to the murder of an inmate. She's across the hall in protective custody. Like the other two, Tammy did time at what was once Canada's only federal prison for women in Kingston, Ontario. The notorious P4W stands empty now, shut down after a scandal that shocked the nation. After women were strip-searched and humiliated by male guards, Ottawa appointed Louise Arbour, now a Supreme Court judge, to investigate. Her report led to the transfer of all women to less restrictive institutions. But after several violent outbreaks, some women were sent to more secure male prisons. Even the Deputy Commissioner for Women, Nancy Stapleforth, admits it's not the scenario she would have chosen.
I'm not going to suggest that it's an ideal situation that we currently have. Those units, when those units were opened, it was the option that was available to us. We simply did not have totally in women's facilities the right type or the amount of maximum security cell space that we required to safely house the women.
The warden of the Saskatchewan Penitentiary, Brenda LePage, acknowledges the dilemma of locking a small group of women into a prison made for so many men.
You're having to do corrections in a very closed environment with women who have a propensity to get on each other's nerves, to be assaultive, to not cope with emotions well. So by putting them in a very restrictive, small environment, at times you exacerbate those problems.
Sandy's known prison now longer than life on the outside. She experienced the brutality that forced the old prison for women in Kingston to close, but she actually preferred it there.
They weren't treating us well, right? But what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I know they weren't treating us well, whatever. I'm talking about how big the prison was. We had a gym, we had all this stuff. Now, if we could just bring the prison and put it wherever and start all over again, it would probably be okay.
The violence that was to be curbed by putting women in this more secure men's prison merely followed them here. There may be only 15 women in the Saskatchewan pen, but in the past year there have been 3 hostage takings and a suicide.
I think it suggests that there's ongoing problems. They've certainly been given a lot of intervention. I think most of them, they haven't gotten to the point where they're truly engaged and learning and internalizing what we're offering them.
The only time women here see a larger space is when they attend one of the very few programs on offer. The issue of productive scheduled activity is critical. Corrections Canada has come under repeated criticism for its lack of treatment and learning programs for women.
I have to do 200 mittens for the main kitchen.
To sew, Tammy goes to the Men's Vocational Centre, but venturing this close to male inmates can be unnerving. She, like 85% of women in prison, has a history of male sexual abuse.
I have a hard time with male. There's that fear in me still, and it's hard sometimes for me.
Tammy also sees the native elder. Dyla Houle comes to the penitentiary every day. The kind of spiritual guidance she offers is considered crucial. There's a disproportionately high number of Aboriginal prisoners in Canada. Of the 15 women here at the Max, 12 are native. With Tammy, they deal with the ongoing anguish of past sexual abuse.
It's been hard for me being here, like in a male institution. I get very uncomfortable when I go through the dome and through, because I'm working on a lot of my sexual abuse issues, and it traumatizes me a lot. Diamonds.
Neither Suzanne nor Sandy have programs to go to. That's a problem for Suzanne. She gets out in November, and she wants individual counseling. They've each done group activities before. Now Sandy tries to control her anger on her own. She hasn't seen a counselor in a year.
There's really nothing in a whole day that keeps you busy except sitting here and playing cards or it reminds me awaiting trial. This reminds me when you're waiting trial.
If I don't get the help I need, I'm afraid that I will go back into the crime life. That's all I know. Nobody's teaching me any other way.
To my knowledge, programming is available. Different women choose to participate in different ways, and it may certainly be the case that, that some women may feel that the interventions that they particularly want or the way they'd like it to be delivered isn't available to them.
3 times a day, inmates are warned to get to their cells to be counted. Tammy knows the drill, and today she automatically complies. She's trying to be a model prisoner. Her behavior is constantly monitored, and her only hope of getting out of maximum is to follow the rules. Lisa Barton is one of the favorite guards here. She never walks the range without being aware of the potential for trouble with a prisoner. Still, she knows some of these women will one day be on the outside, and she believes her job is to be supportive and encouraging here on the inside.
I'm supposed to go to the library. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, you'll probably go there. That's this afternoon?
I think so, yeah.
Or is it this evening?
I think it's... No, I go with the teacher, I think.
Oh, okay.
But if not, I'll be going back to Clark Hand.
Because it's such a small unit that you're constantly interacting with them, you're constantly talking to them, and women have far more needs, and women are, this sounds really, but women sort of have to have control of their lives, and just they sometimes fight it at the wrong time and to take control, and that's where we come in and we try to empower them and give them choices to make in their lives, and it may not be 2 choices they like, but it's still choices.
The prison nurse is told Suzanne has a problem.
Come here, LeClaire.
I can't have to lay down. The pain's severe.
What's the matter, LeClaire?
Get this out. It's sharp pain in here. It just started it was just mild this morning when I woke up.
Suzanne appears to be in a constant state of panic. Her immediate health concerns are addressed, but her drug addiction is not.
I'll get them to bring you over and I'll do an assessment.
Okay.
Yes, I still have cravings.
What do you do?
I walk around, I try to keep busy, but if there was anything in here, believe me, I'd be the first to take it. If there's anything on that table, I've asked for help, and they wouldn't give it to me,
So I want to understand. You're not getting any kind of a drug treatment program?
No.
You're not getting any kind of psychiatric care or counseling?
No.
There is a group counseling session for female inmates with addictions. The women are escorted from their corner of the penitentiary to the men's area. You can see the male prisoners close by watching them. We're told the women's program began as we arrived to do our story.
We're going to be spending the next about 2 months, just under 2 months, talking about drugs.
Many of the women in this prison are on prescribed medication, antidepressants, relaxants. Their biggest health risks are related to their addictions, HIV, hepatitis C.
What we can do is somewhat limited. We do have extensive programs to try and deal with drug abuse and substance abuse issues in our institution. We have substance abuse programs. We do try and keep drugs and alcohol out of our facilities.
Male on range.
Tammy's cell is empty. She's been put in segregation. She's not a model inmate yet. Madam Justice Louise Arbour's former commission recommended segregation fall under judicial review.
73 to 71, I'm on my way off the range right now.
Corrections Canada never agreed. Another reminder of just how closed in this women's unit is. Food is brought from the men's side and the women pick it up. Not everyone may consider this enclosed space to be punishment enough, but these women surely do.
I try to make the best out of each day, but I don't think about tomorrow. I just live for today.
I grew up in the dark side of the world. I call it dark side of the world. I don't know the bright side. you know? That's all I want. It's to be normal, to fit in society so society can accept me as I am, you know, as a person. I am, but still a person.
Lock up!
Some women may never know a life other than this one. Others will eventually leave. What they learn here, they will take with them to our cities, our towns.
73 to 71, can you shut the lights off on B3?
Well, we have a room full of people anxious to talk about what we've just witnessed, and we'll start right after this. What to do with Canada's maximum security female offenders? After that terrible incident at the old P4W here in Kingston, they were moved to a men's prison in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. What is the solution on this question? Well, when Madam Justice Arbour recommended that the old P4W be closed down, did she think Kelly Hannah Moffat, criminologist at the University of Toronto and someone who worked on that commission, did she think this is what would happen?
I don't think that she anticipated this to be the outcome of her recommendations. In fact, I think this is the very thing she had hoped to avoid. One of the most important findings of that commission is that she basically underscored that prison as the punishment, not losing your dignity. So going to prison is really about losing freedom, not dignity. And one of the main tenets of the Correctional Services of Canada's approach to female offenders is to try to empower them and to try to prepare them for integration back into the community. And these institutions do little more than warehouse. And they're an age-old solution when you don't know what to do with somebody. And it's easy, and it's inexcusable, and it needs to be addressed.
It must be hard for you to watch one of those inmates suggest that she wished she was back in the old P4W.
Well, it is difficult because it underscores also the issue that just because Prison for Women is closed, the problems that have historically haunted that institution are not gone. And the Prison for Women, while it had a number of deficiencies and while the Correctional Service has made a number of steps in the right direction in terms of improving conditions of confinement for women, at least maximum security women in that institution had access to programs. They had mobility. They were able to move around the institution with relative freedom. They had peers to interact with. They saw more than a box. And they didn't have the fear and threat of the environment that they currently live in, where they're surrounded by a male population.
Kim Pate is with the Elizabeth Fry Society of Canada. What's your feeling about this?
I think this really, for us, typifies what's wrong with what's happened. We've had, in many respects, a couple of steps forward and some steps back for women prisoners in this country. We're really back to the turn of the century, having women in men's prisons. And I think it speaks to the issues that were raised in the previous documentary as well. We know that when there are other options, they are used for women. In this region, for instance, in the Ontario region, there are no maximum security beds. There were supposed to be 34, but a court action stopped that. In places where there are maximum security beds, women are classified as maximum security, and disproportionately it's women of color, racialized women, it's women with mental and cognitive disabilities, and that's who we're seeing ending up in max units, and mostly because they're hard to manage. And we don't dispute that. Women who are emotional, women who slash, women who try to kill themselves are hard to manage. And we know the history is that first they'll often act out against themselves. Then, when no other intervention happens, they start to act out against each other, and then eventually against staff. And that's exactly what we've seen at Saskatchewan Penitentiary.
Well, let's ask Lynn Myers, who's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Solicitor General. Why are we in this situation 6 years after the close of the P4W?
Peter, I think it's fair to say that people talked for many decades about closing P4W. We actually, as a government, did it. Having said that, I want to point out that places like Grand Valley, for example, in Kitchener, Ontario, are looking at annex facilities for maximum for women. Those places are models in terms of what we can do in a good, constructive way.
But it's 6 years. It's an awfully long time.
I know, we can't excuse that. We have to say, we have to move on, and we have to do the right thing as soon as we can.
But what's the plan? Is there a plan now?
Yes.
What can you say to those women about when they'll be leaving Prince Albert?
Well, I can't give definitive times, but what I can say is that we are in the process of putting those kinds of facilities in place. Because, as has been pointed out, there's a lot of issues of self-esteem, there's a lot of substance abuse programs that need to be in place, psychological programs and other things. These are important things that we as Corrections Canada, and more to the point the government, are prepared to do, and we have to do it.
Okay, a brief comment from one of the corrections officers here in the audience.
Oh, yes, Peter. My name is Roy Tremblay. I'm a CO2 officer at Joyceville Institution. The only comment I'd like to make on this was where it stated about the female offenders were humiliated by male guards, etc. like that. I think what has to be put into context is the staff did a very difficult job given the training and the direction that they had at that time, and I don't think it was the deliberate intent of those staff there to cause any humiliation. They were given a job to do, they went in and did it, whether it was right or wrong, and that came out in the Arbor Commission inquiry, but it was not something that was done by staff, it was done deliberately.
All right, we're going to leave one. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on, but we appreciate that comment, as all our comments here so far. Our first hour is just about over, they tell us, but we have much more ahead. We'll show you the pressures that can crush correctional officers. You probably call them guards. You'll see the inside of a minimum security facility and the toughest penitentiary in the country as well. So don't go away. We've only just begun. Hello again and welcome back to our second hour from Collins Bay. We're ready now to move to our next report. It's about guards, more formally called correctional officers. There are about 5,500 of them in the system doing work that is often thankless and dangerous. Diana Swain went to get to know the guards at Stony Mountain Penitentiary near Winnipeg, a medium security institution that first opened in 1876.
I'm not saying I'm Mr. Perfect correctional officer. I can be an asshole.
There's guards that come here for their paychecks. There's guards that come here because they really do want to make a difference. And there's guards that come here to fuck with you.
I'll treat you the way you treat me. You've got to remember that. We tell them when to eat. We tell them when to go to bed. We tell them when to lock up. We tell them where to go. And that's not something that's easy for them. They are afraid. And if they aren't telling you that, they're lying.
Love you.
Bye. Bye.
He begins his workday like anyone else.
It takes about 40 minutes for me to get from my home to this institution. You've got 40 minutes to think, to prepare yourself.
Gilles Guillasson is a correctional officer at the medium security prison called Stony Mountain.
And then you see the institution sitting there. You're wondering, okay, is this going to be my last day? Am I going to walk into something that is totally innocent and turns ugly? We found a shiv. What else did we find?
Hacksaw blade.
Hacksaw blade.
Break it off, attach it onto a stick. You want to get it.
You think about those things.
What greets Guillasson today is a full lockdown.
Helm open 14!
Officers are searching every inmate, every cell. Some billiard balls have gone missing from the rec hall. A knife has been smuggled out of the kitchen, hidden somewhere by the inmates. Officers believe rival gangs are preparing for battle. Every crack in this aging institution is being checked.
Sometimes what they do is there's a hole, they'll fill it up with toothpaste, paint over it, and you would never know it was even there. So that's why you gotta check every nook and cranny just to make sure there's nothing, no little secret compartments.
The officers know anything they miss could just as easily be used against them.
And it was located up in the light fixture. They just slide it up underneath the light, and if they need it, they've got coat hangers and you just scoop it out quickly in a hurry. That's why these searches have to take place. Someone's going to get hurt one day.
Lockdowns like this don't happen very often. The last one here was a year ago. But sometimes when you change the strict routine of this place, it can actually serve to heighten tensions. That's something the correctional officers have to be keenly aware of, because they're outnumbered by the inmates 10 to 1. In just a few hours, officers have collected a stash of homemade weapons. Metal, wood, and glass fashioned into shivs or shanks.
Sometimes you're surprised what you find. They're ingenious on what they come up with.
They're makeshift, but close at hand. The officers don't carry weapons. They don't want them stripped away by the inmates. The guard's arsenal is locked in the armory, broken out only for the most extreme confrontations.
My weapon is my wits, my brain, and how I go about it in different situations.
Just the day before our interview, Guillasson was threatened by an inmate hiding a sharpened toothbrush in his hand. How did you react?
I just took it away from him real quickly, and then I put him up against the wall and called for some handcuffs, and we cuffed him up. And you got to react. You've got to know what you're doing.
It was overwhelming at first, and my mom was devastated that I was going to, get killed, and horrible things were going to happen to me, and I'm a woman.
Kelly Boyle is a newcomer, just a year on the job.
Sometimes I go home very frustrated because it's not always easy to deal with every offender. It's not always successful. Sometimes they'll get you to the point where you're just ready to blow, and it's hard to separate yourself from that at times. Other times it's very rewarding.
A lot of it just standing around watching things.
And this man has stood guard over a lot of inmates. John Shaw has been a correctional officer for 28 years, a milestone unsurpassed at this prison.
I think of myself as probably the toughest screws that ever walked the floors of Stony Mountain.
This career correctional officer is convinced the public has no idea what he really does.
They watch a lot of American movies and they think we run around armed to the teeth with the sunglasses on, that you only see one way, and we occasionally beat them up for something to do, but the general public, I think, has very little idea of what actually goes on inside.
Day 2 of the lockdown.
On the day shift, the lockdown and the searching continues.
Guards get updated at their morning briefing. The inmates remain locked in their cells, their normal prison freedoms suspended.
It can be stressful because a lot of tempers get flared, so a lot of guys get angry.
They don't like it. The bottom line is they don't like it. And sometimes it'd be like police coming into your house and tearing everything apart and saying, okay, put everything back and just move on.
Fucking stepping over my bed, those fucking pigs. I could go fucking step on their bed, fuck.
They're just showing off, But, yeah, it seems like that. I mean, it's just their way of expressing their love for us, I think.
Shaw's heard it all before. And since he started, he's seen a big change in the relationship between guards and inmates.
If there was any problems with inmates and inmate and the staff went at it, well, they just sort of duked it out, and in the morning, inmates would have a black eye and the staff would have a black eye, and that was the end of that.
And I wake up, my knife is gone.
Correctional officers will tell you their job has evolved. No longer simply the key holders, officers now play an active role in rehabilitation through counseling and one-on-one casework.
Holy, that is really good. They should all be given a chance. Everyone should be given a chance.
But prison life has evolved too, with new threats.
Wires, hook onto a needle. Tattooing.
This tattoo needle may seem harmless, but it can transmit potentially fatal diseases from one inmate to another, or to an unsuspecting guard.
I felt something jab me. I looked down, I saw a little bit of blood, and I opened up the bag, and I saw a needle.
4 years ago, Guillaume's hand was punctured by a needle seized from an inmate's cell. It sent him on a year-long odyssey of prescription drugs, tests, and a gnawing fear he would contract HIV.
First month was hell. Thinking, am I going to infect my wife? Am I going to infect my kids?
The tests have always come back negative. And yet what was a terrifying experience is what Guillaume says motivates him to stay.
What was another fellow officer gets stabbed with a needle, and he goes through the same thing that I went through? Who's going to be there for him? Who's going to be able to help him out? If I'm able to give that back to somebody, then yeah, it's worth being here.
Being there can also mean protecting your fellow officer. Because when violence erupts here, it can be deadly. July 1984. Some inmates seized control, killing 2 guards by stabbing them with a pair of scissors during a botched hostage-taking. That night, John Shaw found himself with a shotgun in his hands, watching the life drain from a fellow officer.
A trail of blood across the floor, about 1.5 feet wide and about 1/4 inch thick.
Fire! History has proved the need for the shooting range. Every officer practices the skill of deadly force and hopes they'll never have to use it.
Pray that we don't have to go through it. Understanding that what comes after it is pretty traumatic, so I wouldn't want to go through it.
You've been threatened. You've been stuck with a needle. You've had to be tested for HIV. That's a pretty high price to pay for a job.
Not really. There is that underlying fear that something could happen. You've got to be able to put that behind you. If you don't put that behind you, I don't know how long you'll last.
It's a well-known fact that the inmates only let us run it as long as they want us to, which is true. They can take it any time if they were organised, but they can't get out. They can't get over the walls.
So anything good happened at work today?
Still in lockdown. Sometimes I'll admit to you, I do take it home. I mean, I can't just leave that behind. I mean, if an incident happened here and I have to talk to somebody, who better to listen to me than my wife?
I always have people asking me the same question, like, aren't you afraid? And I say yes, but I mean, you deal with it, you learn to deal with it.
You take the good and you take the bad and you put it all together and you prepare yourself. That's what you do.
John Shaw, the veteran corrections officer at Stony Mountain, will be online at cbc.ca after this broadcast. They used to be called guards. Now they're called corrections officers. Part of the reason for that is they do much more now than they used to do. The question is, are they trained to do more? Lou Kelly is the former warden at Millhaven. He's also the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the Ontario Region. Lou Kelly, are they trained to do all these extra things now?
Well, certainly they have all the basic training that they require to perform their duties. I think that the demands of the job today are placing increased demands on us to provide additional training to them.
Are they getting that additional training?
Yes, for the most part, I think they are. Probably not to the extent that we would like to within the constraints of budgets.
Like what? What is the additional training
Well, I think that what we've tried to do is to recruit individuals who have the necessary interpersonal skills to deal with difficult people. But I think that we need to do additional training with our staff to deal with the types of conflict that occur within the prison environment. I think we could do more there.
Sylvain Martel is a corrections officer in Drummondville.
I think I must disagree with Mr. Kelly on this issue. The officer receiving the basic training at core training at the academy, and for the most part the only training they will receive is probably weapons, CPR, first aid, which is strictly basic. In order to deal with the situation we are dealing with, the population has changed over the years. The officers are not equipped to deal with those situations. It's exactly why about 3 weeks ago they formed their own union, is to address those concerns for health and safety to management. That management was not listening in the past. When I mean health and safety, I'm talking about exactly what the officers went through here. He was poked with a needle. If it was HIV, what happens to him after? What's happened to him, to his family? What's happening to his co-worker, to his people around him? And that is why that UCOSAC CSN wants to get on with correction in order to find a solution, to get training on this issue. It's not only that. You also have critical incident after a riot. Let's say that an officer's been taken hostage and he can no longer work in a correctional facility. What are we going to do with this officer? Well, from what I've seen, they've been discarded like rags.
Todd Sloan is a member of the Corrections Investigation Staff, which is kind of like an ombudsman service. It's not, it's funded by Ottawa, but it's not tied to Corrections Canada. Do you get a lot of concerns about guards, from inmates, about the way guards operate?
I think that the level at which the concerns come to our attention is not so much in terms of the actual conduct of the guards, although of course, being a complaint-driven organization, we get a lot of that. It's the provision of the resources and the buy-in, especially by middle management, in terms of providing the resources, providing the procedures, making sure that they're properly maintained. I'd like to say, as an aside, that a good example of that was the episode in terms of the tattoo needle. Mm-hmm. Now here's an area where many years ago an expert committee on AIDS prevention determined that a very simple, practical way of avoiding the kind of disease transmission that officer went through a year of worrying about would be to legalize, to legitimize, because I don't even think it's illegal, the tattooing system within institutions. And yet there seems to be a reticence to deal with that even.
Okay, I've got time for one last brief comment on the guards story. Brian Stewart spent a lot of good time in the last month inside the prison walls, and you came away with a clear impression of guards in this system.
Well, what really struck me is how much more complex their job is than we think it is, and how much more their skills have to be formidable to work this system. I also felt they are subjected to much more intimidation, or the threat of intimidation on the outside than we're quite aware of. But overall, I think they have one very strong legitimate beef, and that is they are undervalued by society. I don't think our society actually has a comprehension yet of just what a service they provide and how difficult it is.
Well, it's important because living conditions are very much working conditions, and prison is very much an artificial environment. It takes a tremendous amount of skill to survive it, but also to work in it.
Okay, Kevin Brown wants to make a fast comment.
I have a comment here. I've lived behind the wire for a number of years. I've dealt with many different officers from most levels of security. I've seen good and bad in both sides of the wire. For the most part, I find that you'll find that staff are put into positions because they have a degree. They have no idea on how to deal with people. I've seen officers that are 1 minute on the line turning a key, the next minute they're doing casework, that with no training at all. The guards, I know they have a function and they have to be there. But let's not forget, you know, like for instance, when this officer over here talks about the job he had to do, where the men had to go in and, you know, physically tear the clothing off of women, or where officers are ordered to remove Tampexes from women's vaginas in the search for drugs. Or we talk about guards that if you're not one of these guys that are fluttering around the guards and hanging out with them and talking with them, it's a popularity contest. The next thing you have to do is, if you're not kissing up over here, somebody's writing a report which goes to somebody else.
Okay, but what's your point?
You know, as you're going.
What's your point?
My point is, you know, with guards, they're human beings in terms of the sense that they can be angry with you, they can do things, you'd be surprised what can be going on between guards and so on and so forth in terms of how they deal with us and how we are treated.
They may say the same thing about you, right?
Yeah, that's very true, but you know, it's a funny thing though, that it seems like it's always the inmate. It's never the guard. It's always the inmate.
Okay, we've got to leave it there because we've got to move on. We've got other territory to cover. We'll be right back on this CBC News Big Picture special. We're going to meet men who have been sentenced to life in prison. Here's a statistic you may find surprising. Almost 25% of all federal inmates have committed homicide. That's more than 3,000 people. Many have been sentenced to life in prison. This is an especially difficult group for corrections, where the balance between punishment and rehabilitation is hardest to find. Ralph Benmergui went to Warkworth Penitentiary in Eastern Ontario to find out how lifers do the time.
Breakfast, breakfast.
This is Warkworth, a medium security institution. In Max, you spend most of your time in lockup. Here, you can move around. 1 in 4 inmates is doing life. This is the story of 2 of those men.
I think about how avoidable the whole thing was. I think about his family and some of the people that we shared commonly as friends.
It was a drug deal gone bad that got Dave Morrison here. Morrison and another man went to meet 2 other guys on a lonely road in Burlington, Ontario. When it was over, one man lay dead, beaten and shot to death. The other was paralyzed by a bullet and left on the road in a pool of his own blood.
I'm sure there is no greater crime than the taking of a human life. I know how precious I find life, and I know that to take away something that is so precious would be, again, it is the worst crime.
Now, you didn't actually pull a trigger. You're on the other side of that, right?
Can't get into that, Ralph, I can't.
Morrison is in year 3 of his life sentence and is appealing his conviction.
I denied it, I hid it, I lied to everybody about it. It's unimaginable, you know, what you're capable of doing. I mean, anybody, you know, if put in that situation, if driven to that moment, that flash in time, you know, I think you can. It's hard to believe because you grow up or you think that you'd never be able to do something like that. But you know, you're capable of it.
It took Wade more than 10 years in prison to admit that he had in fact murdered his victim. At the age of 38, Wade's an old-timer in the lifers community at Warkworth. He's over the hump, as he says, in the 13th year of his life sentence. For Wade and Dave, those are their crimes. This is how they do their time.
I'm the senior clerk at the manufacturing site here.
There you go. Yeah, see, there's the stuff there.
We manufacture office furniture, a lot of custom cabinets. Lately, we're doing a big project for the government, kiosks, information kiosks that are going across the country. It's a fairly big operation.
Gone are the days of stamping license plates. Under the name of Corcan, inmates across the country produce an array of products and make the government $20 million a year. What the inmates make and what they do with it is another story.
I make $1 an hour like everybody else does, or it works out to about $6.90 a day for a 7-hour workday.
And then you gotta go buy all your own stuff? What do you buy with that?
Tobacco, stamps, juice.
I just found out about continuity today.
Today is payday, so one of the stops this morning is the canteen.
Can I get 180 yolk card and Farmer Plus baby powder, the big one?
No cash here, too much potential for trouble.
Next number, please.
They just have credits in an account controlled by a fingerprint scanner.
5 export A and 20.
The number one purchase is cigarettes.
Anything else?
That's it, guys.
Just about everybody here smokes. But it's about more than nicotine. The Hollywood version of jail, which is what we all grew up with, is that cigarettes are money. That if you want something, you say, I'll give you so many cigarettes for that. Is that one of the truer or non-truer expressions of a
cigarettes? Tobacco is the vehicle of commerce, I guess, in any institution.
Yeah. Having a smoke is a small pleasure. If there's some freedom, it's tempered. You don't work, you stay in your cell.
Count up, close your doors, stand up, count time.
Just before noon, another lockup. Everybody is counted.
15.
After the lockup, lunchtime. On the menu, submarine sandwiches. For most, one of the better meals. If you don't like it, go shop at the canteen.
Okay, so you're starting to see how it's all calculated.
Like the rest of us, you finish a hard day's work and you head home. Except here, they check to make sure you actually arrive. A quick check of the in-house cable to see what's for dinner.
Yeah, I'm going to skip the deep fried fish and the roasted potatoes.
Dave takes a pass on tonight's meal. He usually does. Time to improvise. The boys grab what they can. Onions and peppers from Dave's pal Terry. He grows them in the prison garden.
Needs salt. Getting there.
Their food, made their way.
All right, boys, we don't stand on tradition here. My hands are clean.
Dinner is served.
Well, we lack in table manners, we make up for in culinary skills, right?
After dinner, you've got choices. Back to your cell, out in the yard, or wreck up. Pump some iron, pass some time. But you know, there's people at home watching going, oh, that's nice, weightlifting, isn't that special? Isn't he just having a nice time? There are people who just want you punished.
Okay. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I got sentenced to life, not death, life. I'm alive. I'm going to be alive until I die. If I'm alive here, or I'm alive out there, I'm still going to be doing the things that hopefully will make me a better or a more well-rounded person or a more complete person. Just happens that I'm doing them here.
Pretty much every night, Dave and Wade go to the Lifers Group office. They're on the executive. They got a baseball team, do charity work. We spent a night with them and a few other guys. We talked about doing life and how society sees them. But every lifer I talk to says I did this one really crazy thing and that's done.
That's probably true in a lot of cases, too.
Vast majority of it is true. That is the case. One instant in their lives, and that's it. There are very few guys who have an escalated criminal history that, you know, starting off with small-time robbery or rip-offs and leading into, you know, right up to the ultimate thing, murder, and then spending the rest of their life in prison.
That's what society doesn't understand because they're misinformed, is the life sentence includes your parole, which you are on for the rest of your life.
Nobody, I don't care who it is, can go through something like this and say that they weren't affected by it.
See you guys in the morning.
And, you know, be remorseful, whether they admit it or not. When they're alone with themselves, they can't understand it themselves. And it's a life-altering experience. You're not the same person the moment after it happens. And from then on, you either, you know, you can either become worse or become
but you
a better
could become
person.
worse, or you could decide, you know, that wasn't so bad.
Some people do. Some people do. And
Well, how are we supposed to know which one of you is the guy who doesn't think it was so bad? So when the door closes and the light's off, what goes on for you?
That's your time to reflect. Whether it's about what brought you here, whether it's about the loss of a wife or a girlfriend or a parent or anything else. I mean, this is where it happens. So, you know, I guess, well, I suppose that's what prison's all about. It's saying, here you go, here's your 8 by 10, here's a mattress and a blanket and a pillow, and
see ya.
Now, I'd venture a guess that Ralph is right. A lot of you are probably saying, hard time? Is that hard time? Steve Sullivan is with the Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime. What do you think of that? Is that a hard time for a lifer?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. We, not that long ago, went to a couple of medium security prisons with some families whose loved ones had been killed. And despite the fact that they had problems with the killers of their loved ones being in those institutions so quickly after being sentenced, we all sort of agreed that these were useful institutions for people who have served a long sentence that are coming out. So I think it's really difficult. I think the public does expect punishment. But I don't think they only expect punishment. They do expect that, yes, we're going to punish somebody, but we're also going to, try to, through the process, change them and hopefully rehabilitate them.
Randy White, what do you make of this?
Well, I think, Peter, there's an expectation of society that, life means a certain number of years, parole eligibility notwithstanding. And certainly among victims of crime, there is an expectation that life means a long period of time. The difficulty I often have with the prison system, and I think with any inmate, but lifers would certainly fit into the situation here, is where, how do you motivate an individual who is in prison for a long time? I think the prison system today tends to warehouse people. And I think that just makes for longevity, long days, long weeks, and so on and so forth. And I think the prison system's got to do better in terms of motivating individuals to be occupied in productive things.
Lynn Myers, do you have any disagreement with that?
Oh, I sure do. I think that there are all kinds of programs, lifelong learning, educational things. I toured today and we saw with Corcan doing tanks for the National Defense people. All kinds of productive things. We saw it on the program not so long ago. So there's a number of things that are going on that are very valuable. You have to strike the balance between people who are in for life and the kind of adjustments that need to take place, anger management, substance abuse programs, and all kinds of things that are appropriate. And that is what prisons are all about, striking that balance.
In terms of the facilities they've got in there, I've got to tell you that after Brian's piece ran last night, we got a lot of emails from people saying they've got TVs in their cells. They can watch whatever channel they want all night. Is that appropriate?
No, you have to, and I think a program like this is very valuable to educate Canadians to understand what it really is like in a prison, because it's tough. It's not a nice place. And people who believe that, I think, are really kind of buying into the mythology of the club-fed mentality, which is not at all the case. This is a tough situation for a lot of people, many of whom are here tonight. And it's a tough road to hoe. And the correctional officers who do their job, and I know, Kevin, you may disagree with me a little bit on this, but they do a darn good job for us, bottom line. And Canadians need to respect that.
Okay, we're going to stop you there. We'll get to Kevin and the others a little later, but you've raised an interesting point that we're about to get to. But first, before we take another break, let me tell you that we'll have lifers online at cbc.ca right after the broadcast. Next, inside a minimum security facility. Is it as soft as some say?
I think, why are they there? The prison, you're there for a reason. I don't think that necessarily that you should have as much freedom as the next person because you're there because you've done something wrong.
When critics line up against the Correctional Service, one of their favorite targets, and you heard Lynn Myers mention it just before the break, is the so-called club feds. These are minimum security facilities that house inmates who are not considered risks to escape or likely to harm prison staff or other inmates. To some outsiders, it looks as if criminals are serving their sentences in rather cushy surroundings. The punishment is not nearly harsh enough, they say. Wendy Mesley takes us inside one of these minimum prisons. It's Westmoreland in New Brunswick.
Lots of it there, boys, if you want some.
How's meatloaf, Mike?
Good.
Mike Newman lives in a house with 5 other inmates.
Roy get home? No, Roy's not home yet. No?
Jim's in here for murdering his wife. Paul's in for assault and having a restricted weapon. Sandy's in for impaired driving. And Mike, well, the last time they got him was during a break-in.
How's meatloaf, Jim?
I think she's bringing in one of the...
Well, of course, we set down rules and regulations amongst ourselves in reference to chores, different chores that we had to do throughout the household and keeping this household up. And we all agreed to doing that, and we try to get along with each other as best as possible, and some of us do become friends.
But not
Or
everybody.
acquaintances. Not everybody. What, they call count already, did they? Oh, man, we gotta get up there.
It's 4:45, time for a head count.
Hello, David. How are you? Not bad, buddy. Yourself?
They're all in minimum, either because they're no longer considered a threat to public safety, or their crimes were minor to start with. In Mike's case, he's worked his way down from maximum.
Oh, she's clear?
I got to do a bit of laundry too.
So this is home. When most people think of prisons, they think of guard towers and high walls. Well, here at Westmoreland, there are no fences, no barbed wire. There are not even bars on the windows.
Hi, ladies. Number 4.
Wednesday is grocery day at the small supermarket on prison grounds. Each house gets a credit of $4.10 per inmate per day, a budget of about $170 a week to buy food for the house. The inmates have to agree on the list and make sure the supplies last the week. If they run out, the inmates go without. After years of being fed, clothed, told what to do and when, here the inmates have responsibilities, doing laundry, cooking, managing a budget.
I was approximately 10 years old when I entered the system.
For what?
Well, at that point in time, I had set fire to my family home.
The warden at one prison once described Mike as one of the most dangerous men to ever pass through the gates of a maximum security prison. He was the leader of some of the toughest gangs in some of the country's meanest prisons. Mike never killed anyone, but he was violent, very violent. This is Mike in 1989, when he was declared a dangerous offender, an extreme classification. He'd been charged with assault again after a brawl in this bar where he slashed a woman's face with a broken beer bottle. Mike says he's working on coming to terms with his violent behavior, something he blames on a childhood without many breaks. Sexually abused by a neighbor when he was just 6, and again at age 10 in reform school.
I turned to alcohol at a very early age in my life, too, at the age of 10.
10?
About 10 years old. And I became an alcoholic in that over the years. When I drank, it just shut down all my reasoning and thinking, and all that stuff that I was suppressing just seemed to come up at that point in time in my life. And when it did come up, it was violent. You know, there was a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness and hatred there.
Dangerous offender status is like a life sentence, in that Mike's prison term is indefinite. Basically, he's here until they decide he can go, and even then, he'll be on parole for the rest of his life.
But when I got the indefinite sentence, I said to myself, well, the system's got me now. I always had a fear about dying in prison. I didn't want to die in prison. Mario, you got a few minutes?
Certainly, Mr. Newman. How you doing?
So Mike, the notorious ringleader, quit running the gangs in prison and began trying to change.
I haven't raised my hands to another human being in the last 12 years of my life. And I feel good about that. Maximum sentence for that.
When Mike was released on parole in 1996, his story, a dangerous offender, released from jail and trying to rehabilitate himself, was documented by CBC News. He found God, kicked the booze, was reunited with his wife of 18 years, became a chaplain and worked with inmates, spoke at schools. But 3 years later, a personal crisis, he started drinking again, got into debt, and got nabbed during an attempted break-in. He did some time in medium security, but was later judged low risk to public safety and to escape, and ended up back in Westmoreland. What would happen now? Are you ready?
I believe I'm ready. I know how to handle stressful situations now. I can stop and I can think about it and try to work it through now.
Mike now spends his days working in a furniture plant in Moncton.
So whenever we got one like that that drops, we can always screw it.
This might be one of the first ones way back.
Yeah. Well, it gets me away from the madness. It gets me away from the loneliness that I feel, that I sense when I'm
in prison?
Coming home, I just look at the cars and I'm driving by and I think about my freedom, you know. I wish it was me in that car that was driving instead of Buddy, that type of thing.
You put up the program. You were to work with it. You were to program back. You were to work with it.
Like other inmates, Mike has the nights to himself.
Father, this night now, we just thank you for the privilege of...
He spends time with the volunteers who drop by from Christian groups. Inmates can also receive visitors at the administration building. Some are occasionally allowed visits by their wives in a private setting. In other words, they have freedom to a point. Mike Corbett is the new warden.
Put together so
Inmates know if they go outside those bounds or if they do other things that they're not supposed to do, they don't stay here. In fact, they transfer to higher security again.
But they don't always follow the rules. Until recently, inmates were known to sneak into town to buy booze. Because remember, there's no walls to stop them.
I think, why are they there?
Marlene Kelly can see the prison from the front steps of her house in the village of Dorchester.
Break it up. Another.
She has an 8-year-old child and is expecting her second very soon. And she's afraid. She grew up here, but she thinks the prison population has become larger and more dangerous.
I mean, if you put your child out to play in the front yard, you hope that one's not going to walk along and, you know, say, come here.
There's probably nothing I can say to alleviate her fear.
Corbett says there have been 2 escapes in the last 12 months, but they were both recaptured. And he says it's been more than 10 years since any escapee from Westmoreland has harmed anyone.
Does that make me feel better? No. Just because, you know, it's like, well, I can't guarantee you that they're not going to hurt anybody. But, you know, in the last 10 years they haven't. Well, that's not a guarantee.
But public safety isn't the only issue. Some locals feel the inmates have it too soft.
5 minutes to count and lock up.
You're locked in at night, you know, your alarms go on the door and that at night time. It really is a prison. It's a prison to me. It's a very lonely place to be.
It doesn't matter how nice the setting is. You could house 50 people at the Sheraton or the Hilton. We keep them there for 20 or 30 years and restrict where they go, you're still incarcerated.
And Mike says his chances are a lot better being released from here.
Well, being released from a maximum security institution back into society, it's a culture shock. It's a culture shock, and you really don't know how to act. And for me, over the years, being released from a maximum was always head for the bar. Because I didn't know how to deal with it.
What the statistics show is that 96% of our inmates from this institution succeed on conditional release, on day parole or on full parole. I can absolutely guarantee if you leave them in medium or leave them in maximum and say just stay there until your sentence is over, the failure rate would be, I believe, I'm positive, would be much, much higher.
Just recently, Mike was turned down for parole. He'll get another chance to plead his case for freedom to the parole board in 2 years.
I was just watching these people drive by and just wish that I had my freedom myself. Won't be long, though. Hopefully.
All right, Club Feds. We'll be right back to get reaction to that piece. Don't go away. And welcome back. Club Feds, minimum security. Does it work? Does it not work? Let's go into the audience first of all. Your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are is that a lot of guys start in the max, go down to a medium, and work their way to a minimum, which is like a halfway point to getting back on the street. I think it's a very important step for a lot of long-timers and lifers. I think it's a real good thing.
All right, let's check with a guard here in our audience as well over on this side. Your thought?
Well, I've worked in Collins Bay Pen. I've worked at Pittsburgh, which was a minimum for a short period of time. I'm now at Joyceville. And correctional officers work with the inmates when they apply to go to camp. And what I find is, if you imagine yourself in university or you have a job and you have a goal. I don't think there's any inmate in here that can't say that his goal is to get to camp. And I think that carrot that's in front of them is very important. And as your program has pointed out, it's a key to giving them an opportunity to have success.
All right, Kim Pate, your thought.
The reality is it's a step into the community, and no matter what people say, people are coming back into the community. And so the best way to integrate people is to have them cascade through. We know that. The successes are there, they've been talked about. And we know also that the more brutalizing an environment you put people in, the more likely you'll replicate that. And it's part of why our organization, for instance, is really concerned that when we look at women prisoners, for example, over half of them, as the correctional investigators recently pointed out, are minimum security. And with the exception of a 13-bed house that's slated for closure here in Kingston, there are no minimum security facilities. So we have huge issues in terms of the lack of community release opportunities for women and the importance of preserving those that exist for men, but also developing particular approaches for women prisoners.
Randy White, are you going to make it 4 in a row here?
Peter, I agree on the necessity of minimum prisons. I do think the focus has to be on getting individuals off of drugs, making sure they're adequately prepared to integrate into society. I disagree with golf driving ranges on them. I don't think that's a priority. I disagree with transferring Colin Thatcher's horse out for them, that sort of thing. I think the focus should be on the drugs and the jobs.
Kevin?
Yeah.
You've been to the golf range lately?
I have been to the golf range, yes. A couple of times. You know, you have to remember something, that most inmates, when they've been on the street, a lot of guys have held jobs, they've had families, they've done a lot of things that have been what's considered normal. However, leisure time is a time when most guys get into trouble, when they don't have enough to do after work. Inside the joint, they're trying to mirror the street. That's why they have things like golf courses and their mini putts and things like that the inmates build with their own money, their own time, their own effort, as a way to try to make things better for themselves. I think that it's important that the people out on the street realize that one day we are coming back. We are coming out there, and would you rather see us go from a place like J Unit with the bucket of knives right back to living next door to you, or would you rather see us coming out slowly, gradually, losing all that armor, losing all the weapons, and coming back to you as normal Canadian citizens?
Peter.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, Lynn Mars.
Kevin makes a really good point, and that is you can't go cold turkey. You have to reintegrate into society. And you know, the golf course at Ferndale, let me tell you about the golf course there.
Well, you have to tell me briefly.
It was built by inmates. It's used on the weekends only by inmates. The rest of the time it's used by big brothers and people in the community. The mayor of Mission, British Columbia, thinks it's a wonderful idea. Kevin knows that, and people should understand that these are the things that are important to reintegrate.
One brief comment, a sentence or two right here.
Yes, okay. I'd just like to say that I've never met, I'm a volunteer at Pittsburgh Minimum Security. I've never met anyone that said that they thought it was a good place to be. I've had guys that have walked away literally the night after, and I don't know why anyone would do that. It's a privilege to be there, but...
Okay. I got to thank you for that. Okay? A reminder again of value-added material at cbc.ca. If you are interested in minimum security, there's a full interview with one of the inmates you met in Wendy's documentary.
You learn right away. There's guys there that have been there before you. A lot of them will show guys exactly what's to do and what not to do, what to say, what not to say. Those sort of things you learn as you go, and you learn quickly.
These institutions do little more than warehouse, and they're an age-old solution when you don't know what to do with somebody.
The public does expect punishment, but I don't think they only expect punishment. They do expect that, yes, we're going to punish somebody, but we're also going to, try to, through the process, change them and hopefully rehabilitate them.
This is a CBC News Big Picture Special. Inside Canada's prisons. From Collins Bay Penitentiary in Kingston, Ontario, here is Peter Mansbridge.
Well, we're back now in the chapel of Collins Bay Penitentiary. We've gathered an audience here of inmates and prison staff. At the front of the room, we have a group familiar with prison issues. We'll introduce them to you as the rest of this hour unfolds. First, though, we want to show you two more of our documentaries. Both of them deal with the most dangerous inmates in the federal system. First, Mark Kelly went to Laval, Quebec to report on biker gang members at the Leclerc Institution.
Their bikes are as brash as their reputation. They sell drugs. They kill with knives and bombs. Sometimes the target is rival gangs. Sometimes it's law enforcement officers. Sometimes their own people. And sometimes the Hells Angels are caught and convicted of their crimes.
The popular perception is once the bikers are behind bars, the problem is solved. Well, not if you work here. This is the Leclerc Institution, and these days it's the home of the Hells. Consider this. In the Hells hierarchy, the guys at the top of the gang, the baddest of the bad, they're known as the full patch, and they're a select few, only about 28 in the entire province of Quebec. 14 of them are right here. So are another 50 prospects, or junior members. Coupled with the gang's wealth and connections on the outside, it gives the Angels here the power to control the drug trade, intimidate guards, and strong-arm other inmates. And as we discovered, it also gives them the power to keep their critics silent.
Merci.
Denis Cloutier was brought in as warden here to take control of the growing biker population.
We cannot underestimate their influence, their power at times.
He called a meeting with gang leaders. His message was blunt.
This is not the territory of bikers. This is not the territory of a particular group of inmates. This is the territory of the correctional service, and we show that very clearly.
After Cloutier arrived at Leclerc, so did more Angels. Corrections Canada decided to put them under one roof in Quebec to try to contain what it admits is its top security problem.
So how did you convince your staff that this institution was indeed safe?
I asked each and every one of them, each and every one employee here, there's no tolerance for any intimidation.
And intimidation can kill. 1997, 2 guards gunned down in broad daylight. One of the killers says the head of the Hells Angels in Quebec, Maurice Montboucher, ordered the killings to destabilize the justice system. Some guards complain the Angels can't be reformed, saying they have a corrupting influence on other inmates. Some inmates agree. No one would say that on camera.
They know they're staying here for the long haul.
Just the opposite. Inmate Daniel Letourneau says it's the bikers who are under pressure here.
You feel it boxed in, I'm sure of that. I'm not a biker, but you sense those things.
But you're almost making me then feel sorry for these guys.
In a way, we should, because you should see all the pressure. You read the newspaper every day, they talk about them every day. How would you feel? They'd be talking about you, and all the newspapers and everything, they're saying how bad you are, and you're in jail also.
For days, the Hells Angels refused to talk to us on camera. They wouldn't even allow us to show you their faces. Until Michel Sky Langlois agreed to talk. He's a founding member of the Hells Angels in Montreal, one of the few still alive. He's doing 5 years, charged with trying to smuggle and sell 170 kilos of cocaine. He's been jailed before for his role in the death of 5 gang members back in 1985. He set the ground rules for the interview. No questions about the Angels' activities outside these walls. He wanted to talk about life on the inside.
But I think we get special attention.
I ask him if that attention is deserved.
No, we're no worse than anyone else, and no better.
But prison security says they are a lot worse. A sniffer dog now checks for smuggled drugs after 3 Angels were accused of running a drug smuggling ring here.
We often hear the name Hells Angels coming out of the investigations, saying inmates are bringing in the drugs for us. But that's completely false. We go about our day, and we want to get out of here as quickly as possible. We don't make trouble. We do our time like we're supposed to.
But when they do cause trouble, Cloutier transfers them to a maximum security prison, his toughest weapon. Tough but temporary. Most end up back at Leclerc.
They got to follow the same rules as other inmates. They cannot have a bunker here in this institution, and they cannot have all the space.
But the guards union says maybe the bikers should have their own bunker, a prison of their own, to reduce the threats to inmates, officers, and the system itself.
There's the anti-gang law on the outside, and if we need special laws on the outside, then I think we could use them on the inside as well.
And as the power struggle continues, the fear, the intimidation, inmates like Daniel Letourneau watch and wait.
So who's got the power here?
The warden.
Cloutier or the Hells?
He's got the power. If he's not happy with you, he's been transferring a few of them, so not only them, a few guys. So he's in charge right now.
Right now?
But, no, let's wait and see.
Sky Langlois expects he'll be out of jail in a year, maybe 2. He says time is on his side. That and the Angels' power of persuasion.
I think they'd have to learn to get to know them. If they knew them a little better, they'd be a lot less scared.
Well, before we move on, a reminder that we'll have an expert on the Hells Angels for an online chat after the program at cbc.ca. The bikers make it difficult for authorities because they try to run their organized gangs from the inside. Well, there's another group of inmates who make it tough on corrections and make it tough on themselves. They are men who are considered so difficult to control, so dangerous, that they've been sent to super maximum security at Archambault Penitentiary near Montreal. Sainte-Anne-des-Plaines, Quebec, just north of Montreal. A special prison for special prisoners. Some of Canada's most notorious are here. Like Clifford Olson, he murdered 11 children. Alan Legere, known as the monster of the Miramichi, he murdered 5 people. In the Canadian prison system, this is the end of the line. It's beyond maximum. It's supermax, the special handling unit, known as the SHU, the prison for inmates who are too tough, too violent, and too hot to handle in regular prisons.
All you fucking junkie fucking motherfuckers can't even do shit!
On this day, the prison routine has been disturbed. One of the inmates has been attacked.
The fucking stab a guy and you can't even fucking hurt him!
2 prisoners were in the exercise yard. Quebec provincial police have been called in to investigate. One prisoner stabbed the other 9 times. He couldn't have been planning to get away with it because the courtyard is under video surveillance.
Why is the guy in the SHU?
Inmate Kevin DeRucci says the stabbing was no surprise to other inmates of the Special Handling Unit, the SHU.
The guy's in the SHU for raping other inmates, okay? Transvestites. He's in a population block. He's from protective custody. Of course he's gonna get stabbed.
Crime is not supposed to happen inside here. There are 82 men from across Canada housed here in the Special Handling Unit. About a third of those are convicted murderers. But they're not here because of the murders they committed. They're here because they either attacked another inmate, they attacked a guard, or they tried to escape from a regular prison. Except for the time they spend alone in their cells, they are watched all the time, in their cell blocks or by security cameras monitoring the common rooms where they can meet for a short period of time each day with up to 8 other inmates. In the Canadian prison system, this is as tough as security gets. The question is it too tough? Cameras see and record everything. The flashing yellow boxes draw the guards' attention to movement. Armed guards watch the men in the rooms. If there is a disturbance, they yell a warning. Then, fire a warning shot or drop in a canister of gas. There are reinforcements in the central control room, where all the doors can be locked by remote control and every public area can be seen directly. It's kept dark, so the guards can see out, but the prisoners can't see in. Inmates are never in the presence of prison staff without handcuffs. Inmates who are moved are escorted by 2 guards, unarmed, for fear of a weapon being seized. This man has a medical problem. Watch how he's given his medication by the nurse.
Do some of this.
There is no video surveillance in the cells, but guards search the cells when they suspect something, and even when they don't, they go in at random and check everything. Inmates can buy televisions, stereos, and electronic games. Here's Kevin DeRucci again. He's going to school. DeRucci committed a number of crimes, including robbery. He's in the SHU for an assault in prison.
On page 13. Okay, there's a brainstorming there.
Chances are you've never seen a school like this one.
Okay, so read the text.
The teaching is secondary to the security.
We have to take care not to put our head or ears too much near the slot there, because if somebody is angry with us, he could, give us a pencil, use a pencil as a pick or something.
These courses and others in anger management and substance abuse are at the core of the issue here. Can anybody improve themselves in this environment?
Who tells me
Jason Gallant, convicted of murdering 3 prison guards during a riot.
I have to turn around, get undressed, turn around, and bend over. And then the next day, the day before I saw them upside down between my legs, now they want me to sit in front of them and have them trust the development of my mind to them, to teach me how to be a good human being when they have so violated the citadel of my character.
The SHU is a correctional disaster.
Professor Michael Jackson has been studying Canada's special handling units for more than 20 years.
It's you against not just the staff at the special handling unit, it's you against the world. And you have to fight for survival. And it's dysfunctional, because when you leave there, you're still fighting. You're not a better person, you're a tougher person, you're a more callous person. And the prisoners themselves recognize that that's a terrible loss. And what do they gain? What do we gain? I can't think of anything.
Living in cells like these, in an institution like this, is supposed to help reform an inmate so he can return to regular maximum security prison and then eventually through the prison system to freedom. But in fact, there are some times when an inmate is released directly from here out onto the street. Inmate Kevin DeRucci had that happen to him the last time he got out.
It's from one extreme to the next. 1 minute I'm caged up like an animal for years, and the next minute I'm out there. You know what I mean? And I'm supposed to be able to function. It can't be done. I tried.
It's not appropriate, and I'm dead against it.
The warden of the special handling unit is Marc Artur Hippolyte.
I don't believe in releasing offenders called Turkey into the community. I think we have the capacity of taking appropriate measures as a maximum security institution to control that behavior and prepare the inmate gradually.
But what to do with people like this? The men who are in the special handling unit have problems with anger, problems relating to other people, problems related to problem solving. They've murdered people. They've attacked prison guards. This particular series of outbursts is because men who are not normally near each other have been put into neighboring cells. And if the wrong guys get in the same room, they do try to kill each other.
You won't even see it when it's coming, you fucking piece of shit!
Even here, under the tightest security, they manage to make weapons they call shivs or shanks. Kevin DeRucci used a shank to attack another inmate.
Like this person here who I eventually ended up assaulting threatened my life. Threatened my life. Right in court, I'm going to kill you. All over the joint, telling everybody, as soon as I get my hands on him, I'm going to kill him. Guy's a psychopathic killer. He's a punk. He had no fucking heart. Oh, sorry. He had no heart or nothing, and I got him first. You know what I mean?
He felt he had to do that.
Or he was getting me, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What happened to him?
I stabbed him 2 times. He's in a medium security now, and I never got back to me. I've been in maximum ever since. Well, super maximum and maximum.
The inmates we spoke to in the Special Handling Unit feel Canadians should know about the conditions there and that they should improve them.
I think I'm a man that has some integrity and some dignity. And I find their approach to dealing with, I'll limit it to myself, their approach to dealing with me is appealing to my fear of reprisal rather than my humanity.
I'm here for punishment. There's nothing being accomplished here. It's just a very angry place.
We have committed crimes and we are wrong and we must be punished. That's obvious. Nobody's denying that. But we don't got to be abused. You know what I mean? We don't have to be treated worse than animals. We don't have to be treated like garbage. You know what I mean? And just because we are human beings, there's always the possibility that something good might come out of each and every one of us.
Still a lot to talk about. We'll be right back with our panel and our audience of inmates and penitentiary staff. Welcome back. Well, for most of the last 3 hours, you have witnessed a look inside Canada's federal prison system in a way that perhaps you never have had before. It's time now to try and sum up our thoughts, both at our panel of experts and here in our audience of inmates and correctional officers and other people interested in the prison system in this country. I want to start it off by reading you a quote. Listen to this. The mood and tenor of a nation can be judged by the way it treats its criminals. I think we've all heard versions of that quote. I'm not sure how many of you know who said it. Winston Churchill, 1910. He was a young man at the time. Brian Stewart, what does our prison system say about our country and the mood and tenor of it?
I think it says that we don't pay sufficient attention at times to our institutions, and we've too long left large parts of them in the dark, not penetrated them enough. I think it also says that while that's true about a society, it's also one of the hardest things any society can do to get right, is to get a prison system right, and most countries don't even try. I think the Canadian system does try. It has terrible flaws. It has had disastrous mistakes, but it does try. And it will be interesting in coming years to see how it can build upon some of the successes it perceives within itself, but also correct some of the real glaring errors that are obvious.
Kelly, your thoughts on this?
Well, you're underscoring some important issues, which is we're asking the system to do a very difficult job and to do conflicting things. On one hand, we're saying punish offenders, be retributive. On the other hand, we're saying reform, rehabilitate, and reintegrate. And to some extent, those goals are incompatible. We know that harsh punishments and punitive and oppressive treatment doesn't work or have an appreciable effect on reducing crime. We do know that people do return to the community inevitably. So it is very important to do everything you can to facilitate that reintegration and ensure that it's safe. And I think that tremendous strides have been made toward that objective, but I don't think we're there yet.
I'm going to go into the audience for a moment. This gentleman right here.
Yeah. My question is about the inmates that's facing deportation that needs different programs just the same, but they're often either spun or they're not really aggressive in trying to help those that's trying to get help before they go and face their deportation. I'm wondering, why is it?
Good question. We'll see if anybody has an answer in a moment. Kim, your thought?
I think that's an important issue. I don't have an answer to it. I think that if longer, more brutal sentences made our community safer, then the country to the south of us, the United States, should be the safest place in the world, and we know that's not true. What we're seeing is increasingly the criminal justice system being used as the garbage basket for Canada, for many countries. It's a global phenomenon. What we're seeing is, as we cut back social programs, health programs, education programs, those people who fall through the cracks don't fall far away. They fall to the streets and then very quickly are criminalized. Their survival techniques are criminalized, whether it's carrying drugs across the border, fraud to try and make a welfare check or a no welfare check meet, and increasingly those who were in health systems who during progressive trends were deinstitutionalized are now being institutionalized and criminalized. So we're gradually creating a system which can't say no, can't turn away people, and basically having more and more calls for that to be more regressive by those who are not at risk of being in those systems. And I think one of the things we saw when we talked about the SHU, the last series that was on, one of the things we know is that those prisoners who are most likely to be most severely sanctioned and most severely categorized and assessed as a risk are those who have been institutionalized for long periods of time, particularly racialized groups, particularly those who have been marginalized historically, because what's in their file is every bad thing they've ever done. And for most of us, if you took every bad thing we've ever done in our lives, starting from when we were put into seized out of our home because of abuse and put in child welfare, right through the juvenile justice system, you see a very different picture than if you just looked at focused on positive things. I think one of the things we need to do is really start refocusing and reinvesting the resources that are being wasted on throwing people away and investing them in our communities for social safety nets.
All right, this gentleman here.
I just wanted to say that, like my fellow Con said, a lot of us are getting back out to the community one day, and you know, like it might be fine and dandy for a lot of these guys that need the programming that is offered to them, but you know, once upon a time, the guys were allowed to get into the skilled training, and it's much more probable they're going to get gainful employment if they have, you know, a certificate from skilled training as opposed to a diploma from programming. And kind of on a personal note, I'm a native offender, and the CSC doesn't go far enough, I don't believe, to address the native programming inside. You know, there's different tribes, different cultures, and it's just not addressed. You know, we're permitted one elder, and the government seems to want to just clump us all together.
All right, let's ask about that.
Can I just touch on the programming issue?
Sure, okay.
I think what's important, certainly we recognize the importance of skill development, but I think we've also come to the realization that we have to focus on what it is that brought the individual to prison. And it does little good, I think, to train someone as a plumber or as a vocational person if their fundamental problem is that they're a heroin addict or have difficulty with alcohol or any form of drugs. That is the primary need, and until you address that, all of the skill development in the world is not going to keep them out there. And I think that's one of the things that we have, I think, learned over the years, because we moved away from traditional kind of prison industries in favor of the more...
What about the concern about not enough facilities for Native inmates?
Well, certainly we're well aware, I think, of the issue of the overrepresentation of Native offenders in our prisons. There is, in this particular region, we don't have a large number, but certainly in the Prairie region there are. And we have made, I think, great gains in providing the programming, but there's still room and more to do, I believe.
Steve Sullivan?
I think what your show has shown here tonight is that there's no one-size-fits-all for all different kinds of inmates. I mean, there's people you showed from the SHU, Clifford Olson and Alan Legier, who probably should never get out of prison, and the best we can do is warehouse those people. At the same time, you get a majority of the inmates who we probably can help. If we give them the right tools, you have a lady there from Saskatchewan who's begging for help and telling us if she doesn't get it, she's going to do this again. As a victim's advocate, and I've never been accused of being an offender's advocate, I'm a victim's advocate, it's in our best interest to give these people the help they need, the tools they need, but don't go out and do it again. At the same time, there's other inmates who simply, the best we can do is keep them there.
The other inmates over here. This gentleman, sorry. We got to get you a microphone first, so hold on a minute. There you go.
I'm an inmate. I would just like to reiterate that we were talking about, or we saw the program about the guy doing 2 years and he was afraid to come to prison or come back to prison. Well, there's a flip side to that coin based on this recent discussion. There's people afraid to get out or apprehensive because exactly the word was balance. I don't believe there is a balance with enough vocational programs, education opposed to the, say, substance abuse programs, cognitive skill programs. We do have to make a living when we get out there, and self-esteem issues, particularly for me, has to do with making a living when I get out there. Yes, I'm a recovering drug addict, and I took my programs, whatever, and all programs have to start from within. No matter how many programs you take, it starts here. So I believe there has to be balance.
All right, balance between rehabilitation and punishment. Randy White?
Well, I agree, Peter. I think today the public and victims of crime are more informed. They're more vocal today. They want to see change. Change is inevitable. It's a part of the system evolving as it is. And I think that has to be balanced off with getting inmates back out into society, integrated, free of the problems that they had getting in, which is drugs and alcohol, and trained for a productive function in society. And I think that's where we have to work on.
Todd Sloan?
Peter, I just wanted to make 2 quick points. First of all, in terms of Aboriginals, we constantly hear the phrase, they're overrepresented. The issue is not that they are overrepresented, because that's a function of their entering the system. The issue is that in every determining factor of how they're treated in their movement towards release, they're at a distinct disadvantage. This is after they arrive in the first place. There was a study in 1988 by the Correctional Service that found this, and it's still found today. It's time that there were an independent review of whether systemic discrimination occurs that is preventing Aboriginals from meeting their release. The second point is, if we're looking for some important words on the Correctional Service of Canada, I think we need go no further than Madam Justice Arbour 5 years ago. And to say that it's a shame the extent to which her recommendations, not just with respect to federally sentenced women, but in terms of the system itself, it's a shame that they've fallen by the wayside, is a gross understatement.
Peter.
All right. Lynn Myers?
Peter, it really is about balance at the end of the day. Justice for society, support for our victims, making sure that people who perpetrated that kind of anguish on victims pay the price, and those are the consequences. But after that, there's rehabilitation. And Corrections Canada, I believe, has a kind of balance in place that's important. It is no secret that other countries come to study Canada's system. I mean, Mr. Cameron from Scotland said, we're the best in the world. France studies us. Denmark and Sweden and others. That's no coincidence. The point is that we have in place a kind of system that does work. Do we need to do more? Of course we do. And I can tell you this much, under Lucy McClung, we are going to see the kinds of work and effective work that'll be done in a meaningful way, because she is that kind of person.
All right, Brian Stewart spent a lot of time talking to Lucy.
Well, indeed, foreign experts do come to study the Canadian system, and they find much they like about it, but there is one thing that often shocks them, and that is just how many people we incarcerate in this country. Right. Mm-hmm. And I go back to a statistic at the top. Why do we incarcerate twice as many people as they do in Scandinavia? We're talking about the corrections. But there's the court system that is dumping people in our prison system at a rate that maybe we should begin to question whether there's not better alternatives to a lot of this prison time.
It's more than a court.
Okay, Sylvain first, then Kevin. Sylvain?
From the union point of view, we're quite happy that the Canadian public had a chance to see inside Canada's prisons. As we see on the panel, Corrections Canada and the service is always between a rock and a hard place. We have the law and order on one side that tell us tougher sentence and be more rigid, and on the other side we have the human rights advocate who tell us, well, be more lenient. We believe that with the tools that we have, we've done a fantastic job with Corrections Canada.
All right. Kevin Brown, you've been eloquent tonight on your thoughts. Save this last minute for you.
I think it's important that the Canadian people understand that a lot of what they see in the newspapers, a lot of what they see on TV about us being coddled and kid-gloved just isn't true. We're not given computers and TVs and fancy clothes. We are, by our own doing, ripped from our families, from our loved ones. We are brought to prison. We have to earn every single thing we get. And we have to earn it harder than anybody, because we are paying a debt to society, to victims, to society in general. We have to pay our way. I think it's important that the people know that a lot of us in here are trying our very best to put our lives back on track. We don't want to come back. We don't like it here. We don't like some of the people we live with. We don't like some of the people who have care and control over us. I think it's important that they know that we are human beings too that have made mistakes for whatever reason, whether it be drugs or abuse, or maybe we've been victims ourselves from time to time. And I think that the newspapers and media don't do us justice by when they grab one case that hits the front page and then lump us all in it together and say we're all this and we're all that. Well, we're not all that. We're men that have made mistakes, and we're trying our best to try to come back and be reasonable and be normal people in society. And I think it's important that they know that.
All right. Kevin, we thank you very much. Thank all of our panelists. We're going to take one last break. We have one more break, and then we'll be back to wrap everything up. We'll also tell you where you can find more information on Canada's federal penitentiaries. Well, 3 hours seemed like an awfully long time when we conceived this program, but it did fly by tonight. We have many people to thank. First, everyone in this room for making things so lively. We owe a debt of gratitude to Corrections Canada for giving our crews the access they did. And a major thank you to Collins Bay Institution. It is safe to say that no one planning a penitentiary ever considered the possibility of hosting a live network television program in it. We are aware of how difficult it was to accommodate us, so we are extremely grateful for the help we had here at Collins Bay from the warden, Janet Delott, her assistants, her staff, and yes, the inmates as well. We hope you found the evening informative. If you want to keep on learning, you can log on to our website, cbc.ca, after the broadcast for several online chats in the hours ahead. You can also pick up Maclean's magazine this week, where you'll find some in-depth coverage of Canadian penitentiaries and an article by our own Brian Stewart. And if you missed any part of this program, it will be rebroadcast on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on CBC News World. Thank you so much for watching tonight. I'm Peter Mansbridge at Collins Bay Institution in Kingston, Ontario.